Are you delivering something? Or are you just lost? The old man's voice carried across the quiet street before Darius Carter even had a chance to answer. Several heads turned. A woman walking her dog slowed her pace. A man watering roses paused for a moment. The entire neighborhood seemed wrapped in the soft golden light of a Saturday morning. But the question hung in the air like a cold draft. Darius stood beside his wife near the curb, one hand resting casually in his pocket. Monica Carter remained silent beside him, her eyes fixed on the row of beautiful homes stretching along the street. Willow Ridge Estates looked exactly like the kind of neighborhood people imagined when they talked about success. Wide sidewalks, mature oak trees, perfect lawns trimmed with almost impossible precision, expensive stone facades, large front porches decorated with seasonal flowers. Everything appeared peaceful. Everything appeared welcoming. Until someone decided otherwise. Across the street stood Harold Whitman. At 67, Harold carried himself with the confidence of a man who had spent decades believing he belonged wherever he stood. His gray hair was neatly combed. His polo shirt looked freshly pressed. Even the coffee mug in his hand seemed expensive. He smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "We are just looking around," Darius replied politely. Harold nodded slowly. "Looking around?" His eyes moved from Darius to Monica and back again. Interesting. Monica felt the familiar sensation she had experienced before in places like this. The quick assessment. The assumptions. The invisible judgment disguised as conversation. She kept her expression calm. Years of experience had taught her that some people revealed themselves very quickly if you simply gave them enough time to speak. Harold stepped closer to the edge of his driveway. Homes around here usually start above $2 million. He took a sip of coffee. Not exactly a browsing neighborhood. The implication landed exactly where he intended. Darius could feel it. Monica could too. Around them the street remained quiet. Nobody interrupted. Nobody challenged the comment. The neighborhood had likely heard versions of this voice for years. Darius forced a small smile. "Good thing we are not browsing." For a brief second, Harold looked surprised. Then he chuckled softly. "Well, confidence is important." Monica glanced toward a large colonial-style house at the far end of the street. Something about it caught her attention immediately. The white columns. The wraparound porch. The large maple tree standing beside it. She could not explain why, but the sight of that house made her stop breathing for half a second. A strange feeling settled deep inside her chest. Familiar. Almost impossible. As if she had seen it somewhere before. Harold noticed her staring. "Beautiful place, isn't it?" he said. "Most people only get to admire homes like that from a distance." Darius felt irritation rising but refused to show it. Monica remained focused on the house. The morning breeze moved gently through the trees. Somewhere nearby, wind chimes rattled softly. For reasons she could not yet explain, she felt drawn toward that property. Drawn toward something hidden beneath the polished appearance of the neighborhood. Harold interpreted her silence differently. "You know," he said, lowering his voice slightly, "people move here because they fit the community." Monica finally turned to look at him. Their eyes met. Harold expected discomfort. Embarrassment perhaps. Instead he found something else entirely. Calm. Measured curiosity. Almost as if she were studying him rather than listening to him. The expression unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Darius gently touched Monica's arm. "Ready?" She nodded without looking away from the distant house. Together they began walking back toward their car. Behind them, Harold watched with quiet satisfaction, convinced he had already figured them out. What he did not know was that Monica had not come to Willow Ridge Estates by accident. And as she glanced one final time toward the old colonial house standing beneath the maple tree, she felt certain of only one thing. This was not the last time they would return. The drive home should have taken 20 minutes. Instead it felt much longer. Darius kept both hands on the steering wheel, while afternoon sunlight flashed across the windshield in steady intervals. Beside him, Monica remained unusually quiet. She stared out the passenger window as neighborhoods passed one after another. Small houses became larger houses. Busy roads became quiet streets. Yet her mind never left Willow Ridge Estates. More specifically, It never left the old colonial house beneath the maple tree. Darius glanced at her. You have not said 10 words since we left. Monica blinked as though returning from somewhere far away. I know. You want to tell me what is going on? She hesitated. The soft hum of tires against pavement filled the silence. Finally she looked down at her hands. Did you notice the house at the end of the street? Darius laughed softly. The one you could not stop staring at? Monica nodded. There is something familiar about it. Maybe it just reminds you of another place. She shook her head slowly. No. It felt different than that. Darius said nothing. He knew his wife well enough to recognize when she was trying to understand a feeling she could not yet explain. By the time they reached their downtown condominium, the sun was beginning to sink lower in the sky. Their building overlooked the city skyline, a view they had worked years to earn. Monica unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Everything should have felt normal. The familiar furniture, the framed photographs, the scent of fresh coffee from the automatic brewer in the kitchen. Yet something continued pulling her thoughts backward. After dinner, she disappeared into the small office they used as a workspace. Darius found her 30 minutes later sitting cross-legged on the floor surrounded by storage boxes. Old photo albums lay open beside her. Dust floated through the warm light of a desk lamp. What are you looking for? He asked. Monica carefully turned another page. I am not sure. Most of the photographs showed ordinary memories. Family gatherings, school events, birthday parties, vacations, years passing one picture at a time. Then suddenly Monica stopped moving. Her breathing caught. Darius immediately noticed. What is it? She slowly lifted a photograph from the album. The edges had faded with age. The image showed a young girl standing beside an older man in front of a large house. For several seconds neither spoke. Darius leaned closer. His eyes widened. The house behind them looked remarkably familiar. White columns, wide porch, large front yard. And beside the property stood a maple tree. Smaller than it was now, but unmistakably the same tree. Monica stared at the picture. That is my grandfather. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Darius looked back and forth between the photograph and her face. You have got to be kidding. Monica shook her head. I have not seen this picture in years. She turned it over. On the back, written in faded blue ink, was a date from nearly 25 years earlier. Beneath the date sat a short note in her grandmother's handwriting. Home on Maple Ridge. Monica felt a chill move through her chest. The room suddenly seemed smaller, quieter, more important. Darius sat beside her on the floor. You think it is the same house? Monica looked down at the photograph once more. Then she thought about Harold Whitman standing in his driveway. She thought about the neighborhood, the strange feeling she experienced the moment she saw the property. Slowly she nodded. I do not think that house is a coincidence. For the first time all day, she finally understood why she could not look away from it. Somewhere in the history of that neighborhood was a connection she had forgotten. And now that connection was pulling her back. The photograph remained on the dining room table long after midnight. Monica had placed it beneath the warm glow of a reading lamp, unable to stop looking at it. Every few minutes her eyes returned to the image of the little girl standing beside her grandfather. The porch, the columns, the maple tree. The details were impossible to ignore now. Darius sat across from her with a laptop open in front of him, scrolling through county property records. The city skyline beyond their windows sparkled against the darkness, but neither of them paid much attention to the view. You know what bothers me? Darius asked quietly. Monica looked up. What? He turned the screen toward her. The address. She studied the property record displayed on the monitor. Her pulse quickened immediately. It was the same address, the same house, the same property she had photographed on her phone before they left the neighborhood. Monica leaned back slowly. For a moment she felt as though the room had tilted beneath her feet. I have not thought about my grandfather's connection to that place in years. Darius nodded. Tell me about him. Monica smiled faintly. The expression carried warmth mixed with sadness. His name was Raymond Ellis. She reached for the old photograph again. He was the kind of man who could fix anything. If something broke, everyone called him. Her fingers gently brushed the edge of the picture. I spent entire summers following him around. Darius listened carefully. He had heard stories about Raymond before, but rarely in this much detail. Did he own the house? Monica hesitated. I do not know. The answer surprised even her. For years she had assumed she understood the story. Now she realized there were pieces missing. Pieces she had never questioned. The next morning, Monica took a personal day away from work. By 9 o'clock she was sitting inside the county archives building several miles outside the city. The place smelled faintly of old paper, polished floors, and air conditioning that never seemed to stop running. Rows of filing cabinets stretched beneath fluorescent lights. Elderly researchers sat quietly at long tables reviewing records. Monica felt strangely nervous, as if she were about to discover something important. A clerk helped her locate property documents connected to the address. Then she waited while several boxes were retrieved from storage. 20 minutes later, a stack of aging folders rested before her. She carefully opened the first one. Sale records, tax documents, surveys, transfer agreements. Most of it looked ordinary. Then she noticed a familiar name. Raymond Ellis. Her breath caught. Slowly she sat down. There it was, printed clearly across multiple records. Her grandfather had not owned the property, but he had worked there for nearly 3 decades. Maintenance supervisor, grounds manager, property caretaker. Monica stared at the page. Memories returned unexpectedly. Long afternoons running through open fields. Her grandfather teaching her the names of trees. His stories about a family who once lived on the property. Stories she barely remembered now. As the hours passed, more details emerged. The house had changed ownership several times. Families came and went. Developers became involved. Portions of land were sold. Neighborhood boundaries shifted. Yet Raymond Ellis remained connected to the property through nearly every transition. By late afternoon, Monica stepped outside carrying copies of the records. The summer heat wrapped around her immediately. She stood on the courthouse steps and looked down at the papers in her hands. For years she believed the house had simply triggered an old memory. Now she understood it was something more. Somewhere within the history of that property was a chapter her grandfather never finished telling. And for reasons she could not explain, she felt certain that Harold Whitman was connected to that unfinished story in ways neither she nor Darius had yet discovered. 3 days later, Monica found herself back in Willow Ridge Estates. This time she arrived alone. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the neighborhood, turning the stone facades and manicured lawns into something almost dreamlike. She parked several streets away and walked slowly beneath the canopy of mature trees. In her handbag rested copies of the records she had collected from the archives. Every few steps she glanced toward the colonial house at the end of the street. The feeling had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. She stopped across from the property and studied it carefully. The maple tree towered above the front lawn now, far larger than it appeared in the old photograph. The porch looked freshly painted. Flower beds lined the walkway. Yet beneath the renovations and landscaping, Monica could still see traces of the place her grandfather once knew. Memories drifted through her mind like fragments of an unfinished dream. A wooden swing. Freshly cut grass. The sound of her grandfather laughing somewhere nearby. She was so lost in thought that she almost did not notice the woman approaching from the neighboring yard. "Beautiful house, isn't it?" the woman asked. Monica turned. The speaker appeared to be in her late 70s, dressed in gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat. Her smile seemed genuine. "It is," Monica replied. The woman followed her gaze toward the property. "You are not the first person to stop and stare at it." Monica smiled politely. "I guess it stands out." "It certainly does." The woman set down a small watering can. "I have lived next door for nearly 40 years. Monica felt a spark of curiosity. 40 years. Almost. The woman nodded proudly. "Long enough to remember most of what happened around here." Monica hesitated. Then she made a decision. "Do you happen to remember a man named Raymond Ellis?" The woman's expression changed immediately. Not dramatically, just enough for Monica to notice. "Raymond," she repeated. "Of course I remember Raymond." Monica's heart quickened. "You knew him?" Everybody knew him. The woman smiled warmly. That man practically took care of half the neighborhood. Monica felt an unexpected lump form in her throat. Hearing a stranger speak kindly about her grandfather stirred something deep inside her. "I am his granddaughter," she said softly. The woman looked genuinely surprised. "You are?" She studied Monica's face for a moment. "Well, now I can see it. Especially around the eyes." For the next 20 minutes they talked beside the sidewalk. The woman introduced herself as Evelyn Parker. She shared stories about Raymond helping elderly residents repair fences, trim trees, and maintain properties long before professional management companies became common. Each memory painted a picture Monica had almost forgotten. Then Evelyn mentioned something unexpected. "Your grandfather loved this house." Monica looked toward the colonial property. "He did." Evelyn nodded. "He used to say it reminded him of what hard work could build." Monica glanced down. "Did he ever live here?" "No." Evelyn shook her head. "But he cared for it like it belonged to family." The answer created more questions than it solved. Before leaving, Monica thanked her and started back toward her car. Then Evelyn called after her. "One more thing." Monica turned. The older woman lowered her voice slightly. The man living there now was not the first owner to forget who helped build this neighborhood. Monica stood still. A breeze rustled the leaves overhead. "What do you mean?" Evelyn looked toward the house for several seconds before answering. "Some stories never made it into the property records." Then she picked up her watering can and walked back toward her garden, leaving Monica standing alone on the sidewalk with yet another mystery pulling her deeper into the past. That evening, Monica sat on the balcony of their condominium, long after the city lights appeared below. A warm summer breeze moved gently across the skyline, carrying distant sounds of traffic and laughter from restaurants several blocks away. Darius joined her with 2 cups of coffee and immediately noticed the thoughtful expression on her face. "You found something today," he said. Monica accepted the cup and nodded. "Maybe." She told him everything Evelyn Parker had shared. The stories about Raymond Ellis, the years he spent caring for the neighborhood, the way residents remembered him decades later. Most importantly, she repeated the final comment. "Some stories never made it into the property records." Darius leaned back in his chair. "That sounds like somebody hinting at something." "Exactly." Monica stared into the darkness beyond the balcony railing. "I just do not know what." The next morning, she found herself searching through another storage box tucked away in the back of a closet. It contained items that once belonged to her grandparents. Old holiday cards, family letters, newspaper clippings, receipts faded nearly white with age. Most of it seemed ordinary. Then, buried beneath a stack of photographs, she discovered a worn leather notebook. The cover was cracked. The edges were frayed. Inside, neat handwriting filled page after page. Monica immediately recognized it. Raymond's handwriting. Her pulse quickened. She sat at the dining room table and carefully turned the pages. The notebook contained gardening notes, maintenance schedules, weather observations, and reminders about repairs. At first it seemed exactly like the kind of journal her grandfather would keep. Then she noticed certain entries appearing repeatedly. References to the Maple Ridge property. Notes about meetings, conversations, visitors. Some names appeared over and over. Monica read for nearly 2 hours. The more pages she examined, the more fascinated she became. One entry in particular caught her attention. It had been written nearly 26 years earlier. Raymond described helping prepare the property for a transfer. The sentence was brief. The wording was careful. Yet one phrase stood out. They promised the history would remain part of the house. Monica read the line again. Then again. A strange feeling settled in her chest. She continued searching. Several pages later she found another reference. This one was shorter. Not everyone kept their word. The notebook suddenly felt much heavier in her hands. By late afternoon, Monica returned to Willow Ridge Estates. She parked near the entrance and walked slowly toward the colonial house. The neighborhood looked as beautiful as ever. Children rode bicycles along quiet streets. Sprinklers hissed across emerald lawns. Residents waved to one another from driveways. Yet now Monica viewed everything differently. Somewhere behind the polished appearance existed a story her grandfather clearly believed mattered. As she approached the familiar street, she noticed a moving truck parked beside Harold Whitman's property. Two workers carried boxes toward the garage. Harold stood nearby speaking with someone on the phone. His expression appeared tense. Frustrated, Monica stopped beneath a tree across the street. Harold ended the call and turned toward the workers. For a brief moment he looked older than before. More tired, less certain. Then he noticed her. Their eyes met across the distance. Recognition appeared immediately. Harold straightened his posture and forced a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. Monica remained calm. This time she did not look away first. A warm breeze stirred the leaves overhead. Somewhere nearby a wind chime rattled softly. Anne standing there with her grandfather's notebook tucked inside her bag. Monica felt the story moving forward once again. Whatever had happened years ago was connected to that house, to Harold Whitman, and to a promise someone had broken. The only question remaining was why. The image of the moving truck stayed with Monica long after she returned home. Something about it felt important. Not because people moved every day. People bought homes, sold homes, changed plans. Life shifted constantly. Yet Harold Whitman did not strike her as the kind of man who willingly walked away from anything. Especially not a house that seemed to represent so much of his identity. That evening, rain tapped softly against the windows of the condominium, while Monica and Darius sat at the dining table reviewing Raymond Ellis's notebook. The leather cover lay open between them beneath the warm light of a hanging lamp. Several pages were marked with small paper tabs. Darius leaned forward. "You keep coming back to the same entry." Monica nodded. "Because it feels unfinished." Her finger rested on the sentence. "They promised the history would remain part of the house." She looked up. "Who made that promise?" Darius considered the question. "And why would your grandfather write it down?" The room fell quiet. Beyond the glass walls, city lights shimmered through the rain. Monica slowly turned another page. Most entries discussed landscaping projects and maintenance work. Then she noticed a name she had overlooked before. Arthur Holloway. The name appeared several times over a period of months. Beside one entry, Raymond had written a short note. "Arthur says change is coming whether people like it or not." Monica frowned. "I have never heard that name before." Darius opened his laptop. "Let's see if we can find him." Nearly an hour passed before they discovered anything useful. Arthur Holloway had once owned a construction company. More importantly, records showed he had been involved in the redevelopment of several large properties throughout the county decades earlier. One of those properties was Maple Ridge. Monica stared at the screen. "So he knew my grandfather." Darius nodded slowly. "Looks that way." The next afternoon, Monica returned to the archives. This time she searched specifically for Arthur Holloway. Hours passed among dusty records and aging newspapers. Most references were routine business reports. Then she found an article tucked inside a local newspaper from 27 years earlier. The headline discussed a planned transition involving several historic properties. Monica scanned the article carefully. Halfway through the story she stopped breathing for a second. Arthur Holloway had purchased the Maple Ridge estate from the family who owned it before the neighborhood existed. According to the article, part of the agreement involved preserving the property's historical legacy. Monica immediately thought about Raymond's notebook. The promise, the history, the unfinished story. As she copied the article, another detail caught her attention. Arthur Holloway had later sold the property to a development partnership. One of the listed investors was a younger man named Harold Whitman. Monica sat perfectly still. The fluorescent lights above seemed suddenly brighter. For weeks she had suspected a connection. Now she finally had one. Not proof of wrongdoing. Not some dramatic secret. But a thread connecting the past to the present. When she left the archives that evening, the sky glowed orange with the colors of sunset. She sat inside her car for several minutes holding copies of the article. Her grandfather, Arthur Holloway, Harold Whitman, the same property, the same house, the same history. Somewhere between those names was the answer she had been searching for. And for the first time, Monica began to suspect this story was never really about real estate. It was about who gets remembered, who gets forgotten, And what happens when someone decides the truth is no longer worth preserving? 2 days passed before Monica returned to Willow Ridge Estates. This time Darius came with her. Neither spoke much during the drive. The article about Arthur Holloway rested inside a folder on Monica's lap alongside copies of property records and pages from Raymond Ellis's notebook. The evidence was beginning to form a picture, but large sections remained missing. As they entered the neighborhood, Monica immediately noticed something different. Several real estate signs had appeared near the entrance. One of them carried a bright red banner stretched across the top. Coming soon. Darius noticed it too. That was not there last week. Monica nodded. A strange feeling settled in her chest. They continued driving until the colonial house came into view. The maple tree swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. The white columns glowed beneath the sunlight. And parked in the driveway sat the same moving truck she had seen days earlier. This time there were more boxes, more activity, more signs that something significant was happening. Darius parked across the street. Neither immediately stepped out. For a moment they simply watched. Harold Whitman stood near the garage speaking with a man in a business suit. The two appeared engaged in a serious conversation. Harold's posture looked tense. His usual confidence seemed thinner somehow, more fragile. Monica opened the folder and stared at the article mentioning Arthur Holloway. I keep thinking about that promise. Darius looked at her. The one your grandfather wrote about? She nodded. Why would he write that down unless it mattered? Before Darius could answer, movement caught Monica's eye. An older woman was approaching the driveway from the sidewalk. She walked slowly but with purpose. Harold noticed her immediately. Whatever she said caused him to stiffen. Even from a distance, Monica could see the change in his expression. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Then the woman handed him an envelope and walked away. Harold remained standing there holding it. For several seconds he simply stared at the envelope without opening it. Darius frowned. That looked important. Monica could not explain why, but she agreed. They eventually left the car and began walking through the neighborhood. The air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass and flowering shrubs. Children rode bicycles along quiet streets. Sprinklers clicked rhythmically across emerald lawns. Everything looked peaceful. Yet Monica felt as though she was moving through layers of history, invisible to everyone else. As they passed a small park near the center of the development, a voice called out, "Monica!" She turned in surprise. Sitting on a nearby bench was Evelyn Parker. The older woman smiled warmly and motioned for them to join her. After exchanging greetings, Monica told Evelyn about Arthur Holloway and the newspaper article. The elderly woman listened carefully. Then she nodded. I wondered how long it would take before somebody found that name. Monica leaned forward. You knew him. Everyone did. Evelyn's smile faded slightly. Arthur was not a bad man, but he made decisions that changed things. Darius exchanged a glance with Monica. What kind of decisions? Evelyn looked toward the colonial house in the distance. Her eyes lingered there for several moments. The kind that made some people very wealthy and made other people disappear from the story. Silence settled over the bench. A breeze stirred fallen leaves across the walking path. Monica felt her pulse quicken. Disappear from the story? Evelyn nodded slowly. Your grandfather worried about that more than anyone. The words landed heavily. For months before his death, Raymond had filled that notebook with observations and reminders. What if he had been trying to preserve something? What if the notebook itself was not merely a collection of memories? As the afternoon sunlight stretched across the neighborhood, Monica suddenly realized she might have been asking the wrong question all along. The mystery was not who owned the house. The mystery was whose history had been erased from it. That night, Monica could not stop thinking about Evelyn Parker's words. Some people had disappeared from the story. The phrase echoed through her mind long after she and Darius returned to the city. Rain drifted softly against the windows while traffic lights reflected across the glass towers outside. Their condominium felt quiet, almost suspended between past and present. Monica sat at the dining table with Raymond Ellis's notebook open in front of her. Several pages were marked with colored tabs now. Names, dates, observations, fragments of a history that seemed increasingly important. Darius emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of tea and placed one beside her. You are reading the same pages again. Monica smiled faintly. Because I think I missed something. She turned back to the notebook. Raymond's handwriting remained neat and deliberate. He rarely wasted words. Every entry seemed written by a man who believed details mattered. Around midnight, Monica noticed a folded piece of paper tucked between 2 pages near the back. Her heart immediately quickened. She carefully unfolded it. The paper was older than the notebook pages surrounding it. Yellowed at the edges. A copy of a typed letter. Darius pulled his chair closer. Together they began reading. The letter had been written nearly 25 years earlier. It referenced a planned dedication ceremony connected to the Maple Ridge property before redevelopment began. Several local officials were listed. Community leaders, property owners, business partners. At first nothing seemed unusual. Then Monica reached the final paragraph. Her breath caught. The letter specifically mentioned Raymond Ellis by name. It described him as a key steward of the property whose contributions would be permanently recognized within future plans for the site. Monica read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Permanent recognition, she whispered. Darius nodded slowly. That sounds familiar. It was familiar because the promise appeared again. Different words. Same meaning. The history would remain part of the house. Monica sat back in silence. Somewhere between that letter and the present day, something had changed. The next afternoon she made several phone calls. Most led nowhere. Old offices had closed. Organizations no longer existed. Records had been transferred or archived. Then shortly before 5 o'clock, one call produced an unexpected result. A retired attorney remembered the dedication project. More importantly, he remembered the ceremony being canceled. Monica immediately grabbed a notebook. Canceled, she asked. Why? The attorney paused. Plans changed. Monica waited. What kind of plans? Another pause followed. Developers wanted a different image for the community. The answer sounded simple. Yet something about it bothered her. After the call ended, Monica drove back to Willow Ridge Estates. Evening sunlight washed the neighborhood in gold. Long shadows stretched across sidewalks. The colonial house stood quietly beneath the maple tree. But tonight something else caught her attention. Near the entrance of the neighborhood clubhouse hung a large frame display showing photographs from the community's history. Residents passed it every day. Children rode bicycles nearby. People walked dogs without giving it a second glance. Monica stepped closer. She studied every photograph. Groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, holiday events, early construction, smiling investors, business leaders, property owners. Yet one face never appeared. Raymond Ellis. Not once. Monica stood there for several seconds. The realization settled heavily inside her chest. The promise had not merely been forgotten. It had been removed. Carefully. Completely. As the evening breeze stirred the trees overhead, Monica looked toward the colonial house at the end of the street. For the first time she felt certain of something. Her grandfather had not spent years preserving memories because he feared being forgotten. He had done it because he already knew someone was trying to erase them. Monica left the neighborhood clubhouse just as the last light of day slipped behind the rooftops. The frame display remained fresh in her mind. Dozens of photographs celebrated investors, developers, and community leaders. Yet Raymond Ellis was nowhere to be found. Not a single mention. Not a single image. Not a single line acknowledging the man who had spent decades caring for the property. The omission felt too deliberate to be accidental. That night she spread every document across the dining room table once again. The city beyond the windows glowed beneath a blanket of evening lights. Darius sat beside her, reviewing copies of articles while Monica organized photographs, notebook entries, and property records into neat piles. The silence between them felt comfortable, focused, purposeful. After nearly an hour, Darius picked up the letter mentioning the canceled dedication ceremony. I keep coming back to this, he said. Monica looked up. Me too. Darius tapped the paper. If they planned to honor your grandfather publicly, somebody had to approve the change when the ceremony disappeared. Monica stared at the letter. The idea seemed obvious now. Decisions like that did not simply happen. Someone chose them. Someone signed paperwork. Someone decided whose name would remain and whose would vanish. The next morning brought an unexpected surprise. Shortly after breakfast, Monica received a phone call from Evelyn Parker. Her voice sounded excited. "I found something." Monica immediately grabbed her keys. 40 minutes later, she was sitting in Evelyn's living room. Family photographs lined the shelves. Antique furniture filled the room with warmth and history. Evelyn carefully placed a cardboard box on the coffee table between them. "I almost threw these away years ago," she admitted. Monica opened the box and discovered dozens of old community newsletters. Most dated back more than 20 years. She began flipping through them carefully. Neighborhood events, holiday celebrations, gardening competitions, local announcements. Then one issue stopped her cold. Across the bottom of a faded page appeared a photograph. Monica instantly recognized the face. Raymond Ellis, younger than she remembered, standing beside the maple tree near the colonial house. A caption beneath the image described him as one of the most respected caretakers in the community's history. Monica felt emotion rise unexpectedly inside her chest. For several moments she simply stared at the page. "There he is," Evelyn said softly. Monica nodded. "There he is." But another detail caught her attention. In the corner of the photograph stood a younger Harold Whitman, barely noticeable, yet clearly present. Monica leaned closer. Her pulse quickened. "Evelyn." The older woman adjusted her glasses. "What is it?" Monica pointed toward the image. "He knew my grandfather." Evelyn followed her finger and smiled sadly. "Of course he did." Monica looked up. "You never told me that." Evelyn's expression grew thoughtful. "You never asked." The answer lingered between them. Suddenly the entire story felt different. Harold was not merely connected to the property through business transactions. He had been there. He had known Raymond personally. He had watched the same history unfold. As Monica drove home later that afternoon, the newsletter rested carefully on the passenger seat beside her. The road ahead shimmered beneath the summer sun. For weeks she had been searching for a connection between the past and the present. Now she finally had one. And for the first time, she began to suspect that when Harold Whitman looked at her that first day on the sidewalk, he may not have been seeing a stranger at all. He may have been looking at someone whose family history he already recognized. The newsletter sat on Monica's desk for 2 full days before she finally showed it to anyone outside the family. She had spent hours studying the photograph, enlarging it on a scanner, examining every detail hidden in the faded image. Each time she looked at it, the same realization returned. Harold Whitman had been there. Not as a stranger passing through. Not as a distant investor whose name happened to appear in old records. He had stood only a few feet away from Raymond Ellis. He had witnessed the history that later seemed to disappear. On Thursday morning, Monica and Darius met with a real estate agent in a quiet office overlooking downtown. The appointment had originally been scheduled for a completely different reason, but now everything felt connected. The agent, a friendly woman named Karen Doyle, greeted them warmly and spread several documents across a conference table. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, reflecting off polished glass surfaces. For a few minutes they discussed market conditions and neighborhood trends. Then Karen mentioned something unexpected. The Whitman property officially hit the private market this week. Monica felt her pulse quicken. The colonial house? Karen nodded. One of the most desirable properties in the area. Darius exchanged a glance with Monica. That happened quickly. Karen lowered her voice slightly. From what I understand, the owner wants a discreet sale. Monica thought about the moving truck. The tense conversations. The envelope delivered in the driveway. Suddenly the pieces seemed to fit together. Has there been much interest? Karen smiled. A lot. She opened a folder and slid a listing sheet across the table. There it was. The familiar porch. The white columns. The maple tree. Seeing the property presented as a listing felt strangely emotional. Almost personal. Monica stared at the photograph for several seconds. Then she noticed something else. At the bottom of the page was a scheduled date for final offer review. Only 2 weeks away. Later that afternoon, Monica returned to Willow Ridge Estates alone. The neighborhood looked peaceful beneath bright summer skies. Children played basketball near the park. Neighbors chatted beside mailboxes. Everything appeared normal. Yet beneath the surface, change was clearly underway. As she passed the colonial house, she noticed workers removing several pieces of furniture. Harold stood nearby supervising the process. He looked tired, older than she remembered from their first encounter. For a moment Monica considered continuing past the property. Instead she stopped. Harold noticed her immediately. The two stood quietly across the lawn from one another. Neither spoke at first. Finally Harold nodded toward the house. Beautiful place. Monica followed his gaze. It is. A brief silence followed. Then Harold said something she did not expect. Not many people appreciate what it took to build a neighborhood like this. Monica looked at him carefully. Maybe some people were never given the chance. The words lingered between them. Harold's expression shifted slightly. Not anger. Not surprise. Something closer to discomfort. Before he could respond, a moving crew called his name from the driveway. Harold turned away and walked toward them. Monica remained where she was for another few moments. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the branches of the maple tree, casting moving shadows across the lawn. As she watched, an unexpected thought settled into her mind. For weeks she had been searching for answers about the past. But now the future was moving toward her just as quickly. And somewhere between a forgotten promise, an old photograph, and a house that carried more history than anyone realized, a decision was approaching that would change everything. The following week passed with a strange sense of anticipation. Every day seemed ordinary on the surface, yet Monica felt as though invisible gears were turning somewhere beyond her sight. The offer deadline for the colonial house was approaching. Real estate agents came and went. Cars parked briefly along the curb before disappearing again. Neighbors speculated quietly while pretending not to. Through it all, Harold Whitman remained difficult to read. Sometimes he appeared confident. Other times he seemed distracted, as though carrying concerns he did not want anyone else to see. One afternoon, Darius returned home carrying a large envelope. He placed it carefully on the kitchen counter. Monica immediately recognized the logo in the corner. Karen Doyle's office. For a moment neither of them spoke. The envelope represented months of conversations, planning, and decisions. It also represented something much deeper than a property transaction. Monica opened it slowly. Inside were final documents related to an offer. Darius watched her expression. "How do you feel?" Monica looked down at the papers. The answer was more complicated than she expected. Excited, nervous, hopeful, thoughtful. "I feel like my grandfather is somehow part of this." Darius smiled softly. "I think he has been part of it the entire time." The next morning they met Karen at her office. Sunlight filled the conference room. The city skyline stretched across the windows behind her desk. Several folders waited neatly arranged on the polished table. Karen greeted them with unusual enthusiasm. "I have news." Monica felt her pulse quicken. Karen opened a folder. "Your offer is officially under consideration." Darius exchanged a glance with Monica. "Under consideration?" Karen nodded. There were multiple interested buyers. Monica expected that. The house was beautiful, historic, desirable. Yet Karen's smile widened. "However, there is one interesting detail." She slid a page across the table. Monica read it carefully. The seller had requested additional information regarding only one prospective buyer. Their offer. Darius frowned slightly. "Only ours." "Yes." Karen tapped the page. "Which is unusual." Monica looked down again. Something about the request felt personal. Later that afternoon she drove once more to Willow Ridge Estates. The neighborhood shimmered beneath bright summer sunlight. As she approached the colonial house, she noticed Harold standing alone beneath the maple tree. No moving crew. No real estate agents. Just Harold and the shade of the tree. He appeared deep in thought. For several seconds Monica considered continuing past him. Instead she stopped near the sidewalk. Harold looked up. Their eyes met. This time neither seemed interested in repeating old conversations. The silence felt different. More honest somehow. Harold glanced toward the house. Strange thing about old places. he said quietly. Monica waited. People think they own them. He paused. But sometimes the house remembers more than the people do. The words surprised her. Before she could respond, Harold gave a small nod and walked back toward the porch. Monica remained standing there beneath the warm afternoon light. The statement lingered in her thoughts long after he disappeared inside. That evening, just before sunset, Karen called. Monica answered on the first ring. Her heart was already racing. Monica, Karen said. The seller has made a decision. The room seemed to become completely still. Darius looked up from across the table. Monica tightened her grip on the phone. Outside the windows, the city glowed beneath fading golden light. Inside, everything waited on the next few words. Karen's voice remained calm on the phone, but Monica could hear the excitement beneath it. The seller accepted your offer. For a moment the words did not fully register. Monica simply stood beside the dining table staring through the windows at the fading colors of sunset. Across from her, Darius watched silently, trying to read her expression. Monica, Karen said. Are you still there? She finally nodded before realizing Karen could not see her. Yes, I am here. A smile slowly appeared. Not a triumphant smile. Not the kind that comes from winning. It felt deeper than that. Relief. Gratitude. Something almost impossible to describe. Darius immediately understood. He stood from his chair. We got it. Monica covered the phone and nodded. The look on his face said everything. After months of questions, discoveries, and unexpected connections, the house was finally theirs. The following week moved quickly. Documents were signed. Inspections were completed. Meetings were scheduled. Yet throughout the entire process, one detail continued to surprise Monica. Harold Whitman never challenged the sale, never delayed it, never attempted to negotiate a different arrangement. In fact, according to Karen, he personally approved the final acceptance. The information left Monica thoughtful. The man she met on the sidewalk weeks earlier seemed very different from the man making these decisions now. 3 days before closing, Karen invited them to attend a final document review at a private office near Willow Ridge Estates. The conference room overlooked a small lake surrounded by oak trees. Sunlight reflected off the water while folders and legal papers covered the table. Monica and Darius arrived early. As they waited, Karen entered carrying another file. There is one more thing you should see. Monica looked up. Karen opened the folder and removed a single sheet of paper. The seller requested this be included with the property records. Monica accepted the document carefully. It was a copy of an old community newsletter. The same photograph Evelyn Parker had shown her. Raymond Ellis standing proudly beside the maple tree. Monica felt her breath catch. Beneath the image was a handwritten note. The handwriting was unmistakable. Harold Whitman's. The note was brief. Raymond Ellis helped preserve this property long before most of us arrived. His contribution deserves to be remembered. Silence filled the room. Darius read the note over her shoulder. Karen watched them carefully. I thought you would want to see it. Monica stared at the page for several seconds. The moment felt strangely emotional. Not because it erased the past. It did not. Not because it excused old assumptions. Could not. But because someone had finally chosen to acknowledge the truth. Later that afternoon, after the meeting ended, Monica and Darius stopped outside the colonial house. The maple tree swayed gently above them. The porch looked exactly as it had the first day they saw it. Yet everything felt different now. A moving truck sat at the curb. Workers carried the last remaining boxes toward the street. Harold stood near the front steps speaking with the crew chief. When he noticed Monica and Darius, he paused. For a moment none of them moved. Then Harold walked slowly across the lawn. The afternoon air felt warm and still. He stopped several feet away. His expression was calm, thoughtful, almost weary. Congratulations, he said quietly. Monica looked toward the house and then back at him. Thank you. Harold nodded once. His eyes drifted briefly toward the maple tree. Take care of the place. The words sounded simple. Yet something about them carried far more meaning than either of them needed to explain. As the sunlight filtered through the branches overhead, Monica realized that the story she had spent months uncovering was finally approaching its end. And the next chapter was about to begin. The first morning in the house arrived quietly. No moving crews. No real estate agents. No stacks of documents waiting for signatures. Just sunlight. Soft golden light filtered through the tall windows and stretched across hardwood floors that had witnessed generations of footsteps before theirs. Monica stood alone on the wraparound porch holding a warm cup of coffee between her hands. The neighborhood was beginning to wake. Sprinklers clicked rhythmically across green lawns. Birds moved through the branches of the maple tree overhead. Somewhere down the street, a garage door opened. The moment felt almost unreal. Weeks earlier she had stood on this same street feeling like an outsider. Now she was home. Behind her, the screen door opened gently. Darius stepped onto the porch carrying another cup. He stood beside her without speaking. Neither seemed eager to interrupt the quiet. Sometimes the most important moments required no words at all. Together they looked across Willow Ridge Estates. The neighborhood appeared exactly as it always had. Yet Monica saw it differently now. She no longer saw only expensive homes and carefully maintained landscaping. She saw stories. She saw the invisible history hidden beneath every sidewalk and tree. Most of all, she saw her grandfather. Later that afternoon, while unpacking boxes in what would become her home office, Monica discovered Raymond Ellis's notebook resting inside a storage container. She sat down beside the window and opened it once more. The familiar pages felt lighter now, less like clues, more like memories. As she carefully turned through the entries, something slipped from between the pages and drifted onto the floor. Monica bent down and picked it up. It was a small photograph she had somehow missed before. The image showed Raymond standing beneath the maple tree many years earlier. He was smiling directly at the camera. Behind him stood the colonial house. For a long moment Monica simply stared at the picture. Then she placed it carefully on her desk. A permanent place. A visible place. Exactly where it belonged. That evening, several neighbors stopped by to introduce themselves. Some brought baked goods. Others simply came to say hello. Among them was Evelyn Parker. The older woman smiled warmly as she stepped onto the porch. "He would have loved this," she said softly. Monica knew exactly who she meant. Tears threatened for a moment but never fell. Instead she smiled. "I think so too." As the sun began setting, the neighborhood gathered beneath shades of gold and amber. Children laughed in nearby yards. Wind moved gently through the leaves of the maple tree. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary moments. Yet they felt extraordinary. Just before dusk, Monica walked alone to the edge of the property. The air smelled faintly of grass and summer flowers. Across the street, she noticed an empty driveway where Harold Whitman's vehicle once sat. The house he moved to was somewhere else now. The chapter he represented had ended. Yet she found herself thinking about the handwritten note he left behind. Raymond Ellis helped preserve this property long before most of us arrived. His contribution deserves to be remembered. The words mattered because they were true. Not because they changed the past. Because they finally acknowledged it. Monica looked up toward the branches of the maple tree swaying softly above her. For years her grandfather had worried that part of the story would disappear. In the end, it survived because someone cared enough to remember. A gentle breeze brushed across her face. The last light of day settled across the porch, the lawn, and the old house that had somehow found its way back into her life. And standing there beneath the evening sky, Monica understood something simple and beautiful. This had never been about winning a house. It had always been about coming home.